Okay, so when I finished college, I entered the so-called world of work, and I had an interview with a recruitment agency. In that interview, I got the full brunt of the kind of corporate values that circulate in the world of work, and I was left pretty breathless almost at like how different it is from like the education system, because the difference between them is that if in education, normally if you put in a certain level of work, you get a result back. It's like the input output ratio. That does not exist in the world of work. What exists in the world of work is your popularity, your likability, your connections, who you know rather than what you know. Essentially, that mantra that is always repeated and seems to be effectively existential principle of work culture. So I think societal relations which encompass work are defined by hypocrisy, right? Work is hypocrisy. Society is also hypocrisy. Let me elaborate. We talk about, in one case, for example, professionalism. And we take that usually to mean that if you're a professional, you don't act with prejudice. You act with a degree of morality, fairness, and you don't lose your temper at somebody, right? Well, when it comes down to it, why do we have rampant workplace bullying, cliques, favoritism, and prejudice? Why do we have those things if professionalism is such a real thing? Okay, work is the haven for the bigot, because they can get away with anything for not hiring you. If you're too old, ageism, right? If you have a strange name, perhaps you're a Muslim, right? You won't get hired. Maybe sexual orientation, right? Or your personality, particularly, for example, if you're an introvert, or if you have Asperger's, right? The unemployment rate for Asperger's people is 80%. Why is that, okay? Mental health. Yeah? The reason is bigotry, but they don't face the consequences for that. And the reason they don't face the consequences is because work is a private tyranny within what we sort of are living in the last vestiges of, but democratic society. There are tyrannies existing within democracy, as I referenced Chomsky on that one. Further to that, is work about profit? Because if that were the case, why do we have so many incompetent managers and idiotic decisions that might be profitable in the short term but disastrous in the medium to long term? What about groupthink that sinks corporations? Work isn't really about profit at all. It's actually about control and status. Profit as the means to this, but not the overriding principle or end, okay? So profit is basically, you use that lingo, that kind of ideology to advance up the scales, but at the end of the day, what it really is about controlling other people. And it's not about profit for the company even, it's about siphoning that profit to yourself and your buddies. It's effectively a cartel system, and then we see that on a larger scale with, like, for example, energy companies in Britain operating like cartels. Monopolization, you get maybe 2 or 3 companies and they prop each other up in their own interests. It filters down through the scale because that is essentially the existential conditions of capitalism. The world of work, with its asinine associations with the so-called real world, which ironically is built on an arbitrary set of rituals, imaginary credit, and a social contract that can be overturned like the flick of a switch. This is predicated on saying one thing and doing the other. So it's hypocrisy. It is by no means realistic, pragmatic, or rational. It is the schoolyard extrapolated into adulthood. Competency-based interviews should be named incompetency-based interviews. Who do they filter? Well, they pre-select for those who most closely subscribe to the corporate persona, and what is that? Vapid, shallow, and mainstream, according to societal dictates. A perfectly confident automaton. And what is confidence? Break it down, okay? Confidelity. Not less than 200 years ago, a confidence man was a liar and a trickster. Now we celebrate confidence as per our market economy, which is predicated on selling the illusion of something to generate desire, the basis of capitalism. Tell me about a conflict you have. That could be a competency-based question. Tell me about how you handled a crisis situation. Well, they're not looking for people like you or me, because we don't fit into the corporate persona. They expect you to answer these questions with a grin, because that means you're a conformer. If you can't, you don't cohere with the capitalist human-denying structure. Guess who they pre-select for? Well, it comes back to this: bullies, clique builders, brown-nosers. The true bottom end of humanity, or who I deem as the corporats. They're the people who should have no position of influence in society. Another thing is LinkedIn on this same topic. It's a total cesspit, a veritable breeding ground for corporat work culture, ideology encompassing hustle culture, the overturning of work-life balance, and the denial of humanity that attends with respect to missing out on your family, friends, hobbies, interests, and life outside of work. The kind of people that spew this nonsense are brainwashed and following the script prescribed by the elites under capitalism. If hustle culture and working all hours is so good, tell me then why we have record levels of suicide, depression, and anxiety. Why should people be forced to work or starve and die homeless? How is that not barbaric? How can anyone who supports this actually look in the mirror and accept themselves for what they are without a healthy dose of denial? If you subscribe to a Darwinian survival of the fittest mentality, then why don't you apply that to the elites who would not be fit to survive under the basis of their own rationale? Consider many of the major banks in 2008 were bailed out by the government. Socialism for the rich, but capitalism for all of us. The corporation is loved. It is venerated yet hated in our culture. We hear of corporate greed, but then people go out and buy corporate products and we're forced to work for them. I yearn for the day when the word corporate becomes a swear word, as taboo as the worst slurs in any language. We need to stop buying corporate products entirely and opt out of their system of oppression, unionize and vote for our interests and not against whatever group the status quo demonizes to divert our attention from them. Boomers, Generation X, Generation Z and Millennials, Christians and Muslims, or any other religion, Hinduism, every race, we are all victims of the elite who pass on their insipid ideology down through the various chains of capital production such that they inform the very structures of culture that surround us. Capitalist realism. So capitalist realism is informed by dreams, right? Because what society dreams of then modifies the actual reality. Dreams are kind of discouraged if they don't fit in with the demands of capitalism. Therefore, the kind of respectable dreams that you may have would be to become an entrepreneur or, you know, something like that. The sort of narrative of dreams that kind of shapes our world, well, it has a real effect. And you can see that in London. It's the capital of finance in Europe. It's like second only to New York globally, right? And it's informed by the values and the actual psychological quirks, be that psychopathy or pathology, of the financial elites. It's a very hostile, indifferent and gentrified city now, and it's stripped of the culture it once had. The primary purpose of the elites is to spread their toxic self-contained culture. And on this note, a film like Society, made in 1989, is an excellent deconstruction of these types of siphoned off environments. Like, you have this kind of hub, this cordoned off, partitioned world, this kind of culture, and it loops in on itself and becomes ever more bizarre and toxic. And you can see that with neoliberalism and Randyism. Their culture informs the wider societal culture via the media, which they own, and then you get to internalize it, okay? So if you don't make enough money, you are apparently the loser. But tell me, who's the bigger loser? The drug baron who is responsible for the deaths and immiseration of thousands, if not millions, you know, because they're taking whatever drug they're pushing, they're murdering their competitors, or the person who may not be able to work at all due to a handicap, disability, who knows, right? But maybe they bring joy into the lives of their friends and family. Well, according to the logic of capitalism, the drug baron is the winner and the person to be respected. But that logic is totally skewed because to the extent that it's actually useless. It has actual no pragmatic value, even though capitalism masquerades as something that's eminently pragmatic. Well, why is that? Well, let's just go to global warming, right? Environmental damage, oh, that's an externality. Or let's just deny it outright, even though it's there, right? So it's a lower priority issue compared to profit seeking. Yet that very same externality introduces a significant loss. It's actually stupid to deny climate change because that's bad for your profit-seeking motive, yet they do it anyway. So I return to my original point. It's not about profit, it's about power. And It's a product of human society. Capitalism is a human invention. It's not natural. It's the product of human minds. And guess what? Human society is made up of members of the human race and therefore defined by hypocrisy. A world made in the image of Randian neoliberals. Any kind of city that's fully under the influence of this, right, is lacking in real music, art, culture, or humanity. Because those things don't make an immediate profit. Suffice to say, people who excel at making capital are good at that, but often they display a deficit of understanding or talent in any other area of human existence. But they have this idiotic arrogance to claim expertise in them in light of their capital, because capitalist society tells them that they are masters of the universe, in equating all self-worth with capital, which is a bizarre turn of reasoning. They'll actually see themselves as literally the most important members of human society. I've read the comments. They think science or art is not as important as the financial system, which would prop those things up. But then that introduces the a priori assumption that the financial system is essential to society when there's no evidence for that in the first place, particularly when you consider the fact that capitalism is a northwestern European invention that arose in the 16th and 17th centuries, and there were other cultures in different parts of the globe, for example the Native Americans, who did it quite rightly without it. So we already see this across the board, you know, with capital infiltrating every aspect of life. Music is terrible because that which is pre-selected for widespread dissemination is on the basis of corporate value, not its artistic merit. Ditto for any other entertainment industry, and take comedy for example. It's harder to sell, it can't be reduced to a corporate formula, so it's pushed out of the cinemas. We live in an increasingly joyless, utilitarian and corporate world. Capitalism is the antithesis not only of music, of art, of culture, but also of life itself, and need I say global warming, okay? So ask yourself, do you really want to live in this increasingly absurd and barbaric world, or would you rather do something to change it?